The morning light of Ethros Prime filtered through the crystalline spires, casting rainbow fragments across Princess Lyraliai's hover chair as she positioned herself at the observation deck's edge. Below, in the arena of ascension, 12 teams of the galaxy's finest specimens were stretching, meditating, and in one particularly entertaining case, arguing with what appeared to be a sentient piece of equipment that kept correcting their form. Quirk, remind me again why I torture myself with this annual display of physical perfection. Lyraliai asked, adjusting the neural interface crown that helped compensate for her motor control issues. The delicate circlet hummed softly against her elongated ears, its bioluminescent threads pulsing in rhythm with her thoughts. Because you enjoy psychological self-flagellation, princess? Or perhaps because you find the elaborate ways species justify violence through ceremony fascinating from an anthropological perspective? The AI's voice carried that particular tone of artificial concern that somehow managed to sound more sarcastic than comforting. Both excellent points. Lyraliai's fingers twitched involuntarily as she reached for her tea, the ceramic cup hovering just out of range until the chair's adaptive systems guided her hand. Though I prefer to think of it as research. If I'm going to be the galaxy's most educated spectator, I might as well be thorough about it. The trials of ascension stretched across the massive arena complex below, a series of interconnected challenges that would test everything from raw physical prowess to complex problem-solving under pressure. Winners didn't just earn bragging rights, they gained seats on the Galactic Defense Council, the body responsible for coordinating resistance against the increasingly aggressive Void Syndicate. It was serious business wrapped in a pageantry of tradition, which made it all the more absurd that success still hinged on being able to run fast and hit things hard. The Zephyrian delegation appears to be practicing some form of interpretive combat, Quirk observed. Either that, or they're having a collective seizure. Lyraliai snorted, nearly spilling her tea. The Zephyrians were indeed performing what looked like a cross between martial arts and modern dance, their multiple arms creating patterns that were either deeply spiritual or completely ridiculous. Cultural sensitivity, Quirk. They're expressing their warrior heritage through movement. Ah yes, the ancient art of looking fabulous while preparing to pummel one's opponents. Don't mock them too harshly. At least they're entertaining. Lyraliai's gaze drifted across the other teams. The Korathians were meditating in perfect synchronization, their scaled skin shifting through spectrum of colors that probably meant something profound. The Centaurian delegation had divided into two groups, one practicing with energy weapons while the other engaged in what appeared to be philosophical debate. Though I have to admit, the variety in pre-competition rituals never gets old. A new ship descended through the atmosphere, its approach vector suggesting either supreme confidence or a complete disregard for standard docking protocols. The vessel itself looked like someone had taken parts from a dozen different spacecraft and welded them together with equal parts engineering skill and stubborn optimism. Solar panels jutted out at odd angles, sensor arrays sprouted from unlikely locations, and the entire hull bore the kind of creative repairs that spoke of long journeys through hostile space. Human delegation arriving fashionably late, Quirk announced. Their ship appears to have been assembled by someone with a very loose interpretation of aerodynamic principles. Humans. Lyraliai shook her head, though she couldn't suppress a smile. They approach everything like it's a puzzle that can be solved with enough creativity and caffeine. Sometimes I think they're either the bravest species in the galaxy or the most delusional. Current odds suggest both simultaneously. The human team emerged from their ship with the kind of easy confidence that suggested they either knew something everyone else didn't, or they were very good at faking it. Their leader, a tall man with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes, gestured enthusiastically as he spoke to his companions, his hands describing complex shapes in the air. Even from this distance, Lyraliai could sense the energy radiating from the group, a kind of restless curiosity that seemed to treat the trials less like a sacred competition and more like an interesting engineering problem. They're different from the others, she mused, watching as one of the humans produced what looked like a modified scanner and began taking readings of the arena equipment. Everyone else is preparing their bodies or their minds. The humans are studying the game itself. Cheating. Thinking. Lyraliai's neural crown flickered as her excitement triggered involuntary muscle spasms. The chair's stabilization system smoothly compensated, but she still felt the familiar flutter of frustration. Her mind could race faster than most people could think, but her body insisted on reminding her that not all gifts came without cost. They're approaching this like scientists rather than warriors. The morning ceremonies began with the traditional recitation of the trial's history, a speech that managed to make even heroic sacrifice sound bureaucratic. Princess Lyraliai had memorized every word over the years, had learned to predict exactly when the crowd would cheer and when they would fall silent in reverence. She could probably deliver the speech herself, complete with dramatic pauses and inspiring crescendos, though she suspected her version would include significantly more commentary on the logical inconsistencies in the traditional narrative. "And so we gather," intoned High Arbiter Thane, his voice amplified across the arena, "to witness the selection of those who will stand against the darkness that threatens our unity. Because nothing says, qualified for interstellar diplomacy, like being able to punch things really hard," Lyraliai muttered. "The darkness being the Void Syndicate, presumably, not your running commentary," Quirk replied. "Though both pose significant threats to traditional ceremony." Below, the 12 teams arranged themselves in the ceremonial formation, each group representing not just their homeworld but their entire star system's hopes for representation on the Defense Council. The weight of responsibility should have been crushing, but most of the competitors looked either supremely confident or blissfully unaware of the political implications. The humans, she noticed, looked curious. "Quirk, access the participant files. I want to know more about our human friends." "Accessing. Oh, this is interesting. Their team leader is Captain Jake Morrison, formerly of the Earth Defense Force. Disciplinary record includes, creative interpretation of orders, unauthorized modification of equipment, and my personal favorite, excessive enthusiasm in the face of imminent disaster. Sounds like my kind of person." He's also listed as an engineer diplomat, which is apparently a job category that exists. His team includes a quantum physicist, a xenobiologist, and someone whose official title is General Problem Solver. Lyraliai laughed despite herself. They brought a professional problem solver to a combat trial? It gets better. Their ship's manifest lists experimental adaptive technologies and miscellaneous spare parts for improvised solutions. Either they're very prepared or very confused about what they're here to do. The opening ceremonies concluded with the traditional blessing of the arena, a process that involved enough energy manipulation to power a small city while accomplishing essentially nothing beyond looking impressive. The teams dispersed to their preparation areas, most following established routines that had been refined over centuries of competition. The humans, predictably, went in completely the wrong direction. Instead of heading to the training areas or meditation chambers, they began setting up what looked like a mobile laboratory in their assigned space. Equipment emerged from their ship in a steady stream: scanners, computers, holographic projectors, and devices that defied easy categorization. Within minutes, they had transformed their corner of the preparation complex into something that belonged more in a research facility than a warrior's camp. They're not preparing for the trials, Lyraliai realized. They're preparing to understand them. Unprecedented approach. Also probably against several regulations. Which makes it even more interesting. She directed her chair toward the lift system, ignoring Quirk's surprised electronic chirp. "I think it's time I introduced myself to our unconventional guests. Princess, your father specifically requested that you maintain appropriate distance from the competitors." "My father requests many things. Most of them involve me staying safely out of the way while more capable people handle important matters." The lift descended smoothly, carrying her toward a conversation she suspected would be far more entertaining than another day of watching other people live the life she'd always dreamed of having. Captain Jake Morrison stood knee-deep in disassembled quantum resonators, wondering if his engineering degree had included a course on diplomatic incident prevention. Probably not, considering his current situation involved explaining to a very annoyed Zephyrian why their sacred combat preparation crystals were actually malfunctioning energy dampeners that could kill half the arena if someone sneezed wrong. These crystals focus our warrior spirit, insisted Veltar, his four arms gesturing dramatically while his translator struggled with concepts that apparently didn't exist in standard galactic. They have guided my people for 1,000 cycles. I'm sure they have, Jake replied, carefully extracting another resonator from the crystal matrix. But right now they're also building up enough residual energy to turn this entire section into a very expensive crater. See this reading here? He held up his modified scanner, which was beeping in a way that suggested imminent catastrophe. That's not spiritual enlightenment. That's barely contained antimatter. Veltar's primary eyes narrowed while his secondary ones focused on the scanner. Your human devices understand nothing of Zephyrian technology. My human devices understand explosions in several dozen languages, and they're all screaming right now. Jake's comm unit buzzed with increasingly frantic messages from his team. Apparently, the quantum physicist had discovered that the arena's gravity generators were running on what could charitably be called creative engineering and less charitably called a series of accidents waiting to happen. Look, I'm not questioning your warrior traditions. I'm just suggesting that maybe your ancestors didn't intend for spiritual focus to include potential vaporization. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice crackled through his earpiece. Jake, we've got bigger problems. The arena's entire infrastructure is held together with the technological equivalent of duct tape and prayer. Also, someone's approaching your position. Jake looked up from the crystal array to see a hover chair gliding toward them, its occupant wearing the kind of neural interface crown that marked her as either very important or very dangerous. Possibly both, considering the elegant ears that immediately identified her as a Throsian royalty and the amused expression that suggested she'd been watching his impromptu demolitions lecture. Princess Lyralii, Veltar said, immediately switching to the formal diplomatic register that made his translator sound like it was gargling marbles. We were just discussing the spiritual significance of our preparation rituals with the human representative. I heard, she replied, her voice carrying the kind of dry humor that suggested she'd been enjoying the show. Something about turning the arena into a crater. That would certainly make the trials more interesting, though I suspect the other delegations might object. Jake straightened, realizing he was probably breaking several protocols by being covered in crystal dust while talking to royalty. Captain Morrison, Earth Defense Force. Sorry about the mess. I was just trying to prevent what my scanner insists would be a very exciting but brief light show. No need to apologize. It's refreshing to meet someone who approaches problems with practical solutions rather than ceremonial hand-waving. Her chair's systems adjusted smoothly as she moved closer, and Jake noticed the subtle way the neural crown compensated for involuntary movements. Though I have to ask, is crisis prevention a standard human diplomatic strategy, or are you just naturally inclined toward catastrophe management? Both, actually. We found that most diplomatic situations improve significantly when nobody explodes. Jake's comm unit buzzed again, this time with what sounded like his xenobiologist discovering something that violated several laws of physics. Though I'm starting to think the universe has other plans for this week. Quirk's voice emerged from speakers built into the princess's chair. Princess, your father is requesting your presence at the diplomatic reception. Apparently, the Korathian delegation wishes to discuss trade agreements, which means 2 hours of ritualized small talk about mineral rights. Tell him I'm conducting my own diplomatic mission. Cultural exchange with our human guests. Lyraliai's expression brightened with the kind of mischief that probably gave her security detail nightmares. Besides, Captain Morrison's work seems far more immediately relevant to everyone's continued existence. Veltar's translator made several worried sounds. The crystals are truly dangerous. Only in the sense that they're basically antimatter bombs wrapped in pretty packaging, Jake confirmed. Though I have to admit, from an engineering perspective, it's impressive that they've stayed stable this long. Your people must have incredibly sophisticated containment protocols built into their meditation techniques. We meditate very carefully. Apparently. Jake began reassembling the crystal array with the resonators properly aligned. There, that should prevent any unexpected fireworks. Though you might want to warn your team that their spiritual focus is about to feel significantly different. Less channeling warrior energy, and more, not accidentally creating a fusion reaction. Princess Lyralii watched the process with obvious fascination. You know, most people would have simply reported the safety hazard to arena officials and let them handle it. Most people aren't responsible for keeping their team alive while competing in trials that apparently double as elaborate death traps. Jake's scanner finally stopped screaming, settling into a much more pleasant humming sound. Besides, I've always believed in fixing problems when you find them rather than passing them along to someone else. An admirable philosophy. Quirk, what do our records say about human approach to problem solving? According to available data, humans have a documented tendency to solve complex problems through what they term thinking outside the box, which appears to involve ignoring established procedures and improvising solutions using whatever materials happen to be available. Success rate is surprisingly high, though methods often horrify other species. Jake grinned. That's probably the most accurate description of human engineering I've ever heard. It explains your ship's design aesthetic, Lyralii observed. I was wondering if it was intentional or the result of very bad luck. Little bit of both. We built her from salvaged parts during a 6-month deep space mission when our original ship decided to have what you might call an existence failure. Turns out you can make a functional warp drive from mining equipment and pure stubborn determination. Dr. Chen's voice crackled through the comm again. Jake, you need to see this. The arena's central computer is running diagnostics that predate some star systems. Also, it keeps asking if we want to activate something called Challenge Level Apocalypse, which sounds ominous. Duty calls, Jake said, gesturing toward his team's makeshift laboratory. Though if you're interested in seeing how humans approach ancient alien technology, you're welcome to observe. Fair warning, our methods tend to involve a lot of cursing and occasional small explosions. Both of which sound infinitely more entertaining than trade negotiations. Lyralii's chair adjusted course to follow him. Lead the way, Captain. I'm curious to see what other disasters you'll prevent today. As they moved toward the human encampment, Veltar called after them. Captain Morrison. Should we continue our meditation practices? Just maybe spread out a bit more, Jake called back. And if anyone starts glowing, that's probably a sign to take a break. The human preparation area looked like someone had detonated a research laboratory and then carefully organized the wreckage for maximum efficiency. Equipment hummed, holographic displays showed incomprehensible data streams, and Dr. Chen stood in the middle of it all looking like she'd discovered something that violated her understanding of how the universe was supposed to work. Please tell me you found something simple, like a conspiracy to cheat at the trials, Jake said as they approached. I wish. Jake, this arena isn't just a competition facility. It's a massive data collection system that's been gathering information on every species that's competed here for the past 3 centuries. Biometric data, psychological profiles, tactical analysis, everything you'd need to understand potential opponents in detail. Princess Lyralii's chair stopped moving. That's concerning. It gets worse. The system's been updating its parameters based on current galactic political situations. It knows about the Void Syndicate movements, troop deployments, fleet positions, information that should be classified at the highest levels. Jake felt the familiar chill that came with discovering that simple problems were actually complex catastrophes in disguise. So the trials aren't just about selecting council members. They're about identifying and analyzing the people who'll be making strategic decisions against the syndicate, Chen confirmed. Question is, who's doing the analyzing? The revelation that the arena doubled as a galactic intelligence operation hung in the air like a particularly awkward silence at a family dinner. Princess Lyralii stared at the scrolling data displays, her neural crown flickering as her thoughts raced faster than her voice could follow. So let me understand this correctly, she said finally. For 3 centuries, every delegation that's competed here has been unknowingly providing detailed intelligence profiles to someone. That's the working theory, Dr. Chen replied, pulling up another holographic display that showed data flow patterns resembling a 3-dimensional spiderweb. Though, someone might be understating it. This system has been feeding information to at least 17 different databases, some of which are hidden so deep in subspace that finding them required mathematics I'm pretty sure don't exist yet. Jake rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of what promised to be a spectacular headache. Quirk, please tell me you have some insight into who might have access to Athrosian arena systems. Officially, arena maintenance, competition officials, and the royal family. Unofficially, anyone with sufficient technical knowledge and a flexible relationship with both ethics and interstellar law. That narrows it down to roughly half the galaxy, Lyralii muttered. Though I suppose we can eliminate species that consider technology slightly more advanced than fire to be witchcraft. Dr. Marcus Webb, the team's general problem solver, looked up from a device that was making sounds like an electronic argument. Actually, it gets more interesting. This data collection system. It's not just passive observation. It's been actively modifying trial parameters based on the psychological profiles it builds. Modifying how? Jake asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. Remember the Korathian delegation's meditation session yesterday? The one where they all started glowing in perfect synchronization? According to these logs, the arena's harmonic resonators were adjusted to amplify their natural bioelectric fields. Made them look incredibly impressive and spiritually attuned. Lyralii's eyebrows rose. The system manipulated their performance. Enhanced it, technically. Though I'm not sure the Korathians would appreciate the distinction. Webb gestured at his display. Every delegation has received subtle assistance. Gravity adjustments for the Centaurians during their combat demonstrations, atmospheric pressure modifications for the aquatic Nereidans, even temperature regulation for species that perform better in specific environmental conditions. Except us, Jake realized. The human delegation. Exactly. We're the only team that hasn't received any environmental modifications. In fact, if anything, the system seems to be actively making things slightly more difficult for us. Gravity's been increased by 0.03% in our preparation area, air pressure decreased, and someone disabled the auto-translation protocols for our equipment interfaces. Quirk's voice carried a note of what might have been admiration. Either the system doesn't know how to assist humans, or it's testing whether you can succeed without help. Given our species' reputation for solving problems through creative stubbornness, I'm leaning toward the latter, Jake said. The question is why? Princess Lyralii's chair moved closer to the central display, her elongated ears twitching as she studied the data patterns. May I? Without waiting for an answer, she began interfacing directly with the system through her neural crown. The holographic displays flickered and reorganized themselves into configurations that somehow made more sense despite being far more complex. Fascinating, she murmured. The data collection protocols include psychological modeling algorithms that predict decision-making patterns under stress. It's not just gathering information about what species can do, it's building models of how they think. For what purpose? Chen asked. Strategic planning. If you know how a species reacts to specific types of pressure, you can predict their tactical decisions, their negotiation strategies, their breaking points. Lyralii's hands moved through the holographic interface with increasing speed, her condition apparently no impediment to manipulating data streams. This isn't intelligence gathering for the Defense Council. This is intelligence gathering about the Defense Council. Jake felt pieces clicking into place with the distinctive sound of a plan going catastrophically wrong. The Void Syndicate. They're not just planning to attack during the trials. They're using the trials to build tactical profiles of everyone who'll be making strategic decisions against them. Which means, Webb said slowly, that every delegation here is essentially writing the enemy's playbook for them. Except the humans, Quirk observed. Your delegation's psychological profile is marked as inconclusive, with a footnote that roughly translates to "these people make no sense." That's either very good news or very bad news, Lyralii said. Depending on whether unpredictability is an advantage or a liability when facing an enemy that's built their entire strategy around predicting their opponents. Dr. Chen pulled up another display. There's more. The system's been cross-referencing the behavioral data with known Void Syndicate tactical patterns. It's not just building profiles, it's actively identifying which council members would be most vulnerable to specific types of psychological warfare. Wonderful, Jake muttered. So not only are we unknowingly helping the enemy plan their attacks, we're also providing them with a shopping list of who to target first. On the bright side, Webb offered, at least we know why your disciplinary record lists excessive enthusiasm in the face of imminent disaster. The universe clearly has a sense of humor. Lyralii's fingers paused in their data manipulation. There's something else. The system's been tracking one additional parameter that doesn't fit with intelligence gathering. Which is adaptive potential. It's measuring each delegation's ability to modify their approach when faced with unexpected challenges. Her neural crown pulsed brighter as she accessed deeper data layers. The humans are scoring off the charts in this category. Because we're too stubborn to accept that problems can't be solved? Jake asked. Because you consistently find solutions that the system's predictive models classify as impossible. Lyralii turned her chair to face them directly. Every other species follows logical decision trees. When presented with obstacle A, they employ solution B, with predictable variations based on cultural and psychological factors. Humans appear to look at obstacle A and invent solution Q, which shouldn't work but somehow does. It's a gift, Chen said dryly. Also occasionally a curse. In this case, it might be exactly what we need. Lyralii's expression shifted from analytical to something approaching excitement. The data suggests that while the Void Syndicate has detailed profiles on every other potential council member, they have no reliable model for predicting human tactical decisions. Jake considered this. So we're either completely useless or completely invaluable. Given the circumstances, I'm hoping for the latter. Lyralii gestured at the data stream surrounding them. Captain Morrison, I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. The trials officially begin tomorrow. Based on this intelligence system, every other delegation will perform exactly as predicted, which means their strategic value against the syndicate is essentially zero. But if the human delegation could somehow exceed expectations. You want us to win, Webb said. I want you to be unpredictable enough that the syndicate's models become useless. Unfortunately, there's a small problem with this plan. Just one? Jake asked hopefully. The trial format is designed to favor traditional approaches to problem solving. Physical challenges that require strength and speed, tactical scenarios that reward conventional military thinking, diplomatic simulations that follow established protocols. Lyralii's chair moved restlessly as she spoke. The humans' adaptive creativity is their greatest asset, but the trials won't provide opportunities to demonstrate it. Unless, Chen said slowly, we change the rules. Modify the trials themselves. Quirk's voice carried electronic skepticism. That would require administrative access to the arena's core systems. Or, Jake said, a grin spreading across his face, it would require someone who already has administrative access and a willingness to engage in what could charitably be called creative interpretation of competition regulations. All eyes turned to Princess Lyralii, whose neural crown was flickering in patterns that suggested either intense concentration or mild panic. You're suggesting I help you cheat. I'm suggesting you help us level the playing field, Jake corrected. The trials are supposed to identify the best candidates for the Defense Council. If the current format only rewards predictable thinking, then it's failing in its fundamental purpose. Besides, Webb added, technically we wouldn't be breaking any rules. We'd just be reinterpreting them. Lyralii was quiet for a long moment, her elongated ears twitching as she considered the implications. My father would have me exiled to the Outer Rim if he discovered I'd manipulated the sacred trials. Your father would probably thank you if it meant keeping the galaxy from falling to the Void Syndicate, Chen pointed out. True. And it would be rather satisfying to prove that intelligence and creativity matter more than tradition and physical prowess. Lyraliai's expression shifted to something that would have worried her security detail. Very well, Captain Morrison. I accept your proposition. But I have one condition. Name it. If we're going to rewrite the rules, we're going to do it properly. No half measures, no subtle modifications. If the trials are going to test adaptive thinking, then they're going to test it thoroughly. Jake felt the familiar thrill that came with committing to a plan that was either brilliant or catastrophically stupid. Princess, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful partnership. Let's hope it's not the end of a short-lived rebellion, Quirk observed. Though I admit, the statistical probability of success has improved from impossible to merely highly unlikely. I'll take those odds, Jake said. Now, who wants to help us reprogram a galactic competition? The modified trials began at dawn with what the competitors assumed would be a traditional combat scenario. Instead, they found themselves facing a three-dimensional maze that shifted its configuration every 30 seconds while requiring teams to solve quantum encryption puzzles that unlocked passage routes. The Korathians, who had spent weeks perfecting their synchronized combat techniques, stood frozen at the entrance looking like someone had just explained that their spiritual enlightenment was actually advanced mathematics. This is not the trial of warrior's strength we prepared for, muttered Veltar, his four arms gesturing helplessly at a holographic equation that seemed to mock his confusion. Princess Lyralii watched from the control booth, her neural crown interfacing seamlessly with the arena's modified systems. Quirk, how are our competitors adapting to the new format? The Centaurians are attempting to solve the puzzles through philosophical debate, which is surprisingly ineffective against quantum mechanics. The Zephyrians have concluded that the maze is sentient and are trying to negotiate with it. The Nereidans appear to be having an existential crisis. And the humans? Captain Morrison's team has divided responsibilities. Dr. Chen is mapping the maze's transformation patterns while Webb improvises solutions to puzzles that don't technically have solutions yet. Morrison himself appears to be giving the maze suggestions for improvement. Indeed, Jake was standing in the center of the shifting corridors, apparently having a conversation with the arena's AI systems. Look, I appreciate the complexity, but if you're going to change the layout every 30 seconds, maybe consider leaving some kind of breadcrumb trail. Not for us, we're managing fine, but the Korathians look like they're about to have a collective nervous breakdown. The maze parameters were designed to test adaptive problem solving. The arena's AI replied through speakers embedded in the walls. Right, but adaptive problem solving works better when people don't spend all their time being confused about basic navigation. How about this, keep the quantum puzzles for intellectual challenge, but maybe add some visual cues for the physical layout. Color coding, maybe. Something that doesn't penalize species just because they think in straight lines. Dr. Chen looked up from her calculations. Jake, are you seriously giving the trial system design advice during the competition? Someone has to. This thing was clearly programmed by people who think user-friendly is a character flaw. Princess Lyralii found herself laughing despite the gravity of the situation. The human team had not only adapted to the modified trials, they were actively improving them in real time. While other delegations struggled with the unexpected format, Morrison's team treated each challenge like a collaborative engineering project that happened to involve other people. Princess, came her father's voice through the comm system, the delegations are requesting clarification about the trial modifications. Several are claiming the changes invalidate centuries of tradition. Tell them tradition is what got us into this mess, Lyralii replied, her fingers dancing through the control interfaces. Besides, if they can't adapt to unexpected challenges, how do they expect to handle the Void Syndicate? The second trial replaced conventional tactical combat with a scenario that required teams to coordinate with their supposed opponents to solve a crisis affecting all participants. The setup was elegant in its simplicity. A simulated space station facing multiple system failures, with each team controlling different repair systems that required cooperation to prevent total disaster. Most delegations approached it like a zero-sum competition, trying to maximize their own performance while minimizing others. The humans, predictably, started by calling a general meeting. "Right," Jake announced to the assembled competitors, "we've got 12 different repair systems, 12 teams, and about 20 minutes before this entire station becomes a very expensive piece of space debris. Suggestions?" "This is a competition," protested the Centaurian team leader. "We are meant to demonstrate superior tactical thinking." "Exactly. And superior tactical thinking recognizes that everyone dying is a suboptimal outcome." Jake gestured at the holographic station schematic. "Look, we can either spend 20 minutes trying to outmaneuver each other while the station explodes, or we can spend 5 minutes coordinating repair efforts and 15 minutes figuring out who did the best job at not dying." Webb was already interfacing with teams whose repair systems connected to human-controlled areas. The Zephyrian's atmospheric processors link directly to our life support grid. If we share diagnostic data, we can optimize both systems simultaneously. "Cooperation is not the traditional approach," Veltar observed, though he was already moving toward the shared interface terminals. "Traditional approaches don't work when the rules change," Chen pointed out. "Besides, this scenario isn't testing whether you can beat other people. It's testing whether you can solve problems that are bigger than any individual team." Princess Lyralii monitored the changing dynamics with growing excitement. The modified trial had accomplished something unprecedented. Instead of 12 teams competing against each other, she was watching the formation of a collaborative network that treated the challenge as a shared problem requiring collective solutions. "Quirk, are you recording this?" "Every detail, Princess. Though I should mention that several delegations are performing significantly better under the cooperative model than they did during traditional competitive preparation." "Of course they are. Turns out people work better when they're not spending half their energy trying to sabotage each other." The final trial abandoned all pretense of traditional format. Instead of individual team challenges, competitors found themselves facing a simulation of the actual Void Syndicate threat, a scenario built from the intelligence data that had been secretly collected over centuries of trials. The twist was that success required not just tactical excellence, but the kind of unpredictable thinking that could counter an enemy who had detailed psychological profiles of conventional strategic approaches. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted non-binary intelligences," Jake announced to the assembled competitors, "welcome to the real test. The Void Syndicate has been using these trials to build psychological profiles of everyone who'd be making decisions against them. They know how we think, how we react, how we'll approach tactical problems. Conventional strategy is compromised before it starts. So what do we do?" asked the Nereid delegation leader, her aquatic environmental suit humming with nervous energy. "We think like humans," Princess Lyralii said, her voice carrying across the arena through amplified speakers. She had abandoned the control booth to join the competitors on the arena floor, her hoverchair moving smoothly between the assembled teams. "We approach this problem like it's a puzzle that can be solved through creativity, cooperation, and a complete willingness to ignore how things are supposed to work." The simulation began with a scenario that perfectly matched documented Void Syndicate tactics, a coordinated assault designed to exploit predicted responses from the Galactic Defense Council. For the first few minutes, teams responded exactly as their psychological profiles suggested they would, and the simulated defenders were systematically overwhelmed. Then Jake did something the Syndicate's models couldn't predict. He started treating the enemy fleet like an engineering problem that needed debugging. "Chen, analyze their formation patterns. I think their coordination protocols have optimization flaws we can exploit. Webb, see if you can figure out what happens if we feed their own tactical data back to them through modified sensor returns. Everyone else, forget everything you know about conventional fleet tactics and start thinking about how to break their decision-making algorithms." What followed was less a military engagement than a collaborative exercise in creative chaos. The Korathians used their meditation techniques to confuse enemy sensors, creating false signatures that made fleet positions impossible to track. The Zephyrians turned their ritual combat movements into unpredictable flight patterns that broke conventional targeting systems. The Centaurians applied philosophical paradoxes to tactical communications, creating logical loops that crashed enemy AI coordination protocols. Princess Lyralii found herself at the center of it all, her neural crown interfacing with every system simultaneously, coordinating a defense strategy that violated every established military doctrine while somehow working better than anything in the tactical databases. "Quirk, tell me we're recording all of this," she said, her hands moving through control interfaces with a fluidity that would have been impossible without years of adapting to her condition. "Recording and analyzing, Princess. Though I should point out that what you're doing right now technically qualifies as commanding a military operation. Good thing it's just a simulation. About that, Princess, the arena's communication systems have been broadcasting this entire trial to the Galactic Defense Network. Every military command center in Allied space is watching this engagement." Lyralii's hands paused for just a moment. "So if this strategy actually works, it becomes the new tactical doctrine for countering Void Syndicate operations," Jake finished, overhearing through his comm link. "No pressure or anything." The simulated battle concluded with the Syndicate fleet in full retreat, their coordination systems crashed, their tactical algorithms rewriting themselves in recursive loops, and their command structure paralyzed by the complete unpredictability of the defenders' approach. "Results are conclusive," announced High Arbiter Thane, his voice carrying across the arena with barely concealed amazement. "The modified trials have successfully identified tactical approaches capable of countering previously undefeatable enemy strategies. More importantly," Princess Lyralii said, her voice carrying the authority she'd never quite believed she possessed, "they've demonstrated that cooperation and creative thinking are more valuable than individual excellence and traditional approaches." Jake looked around at the assembled competitors, all of whom were grinning despite their exhaustion. "So I guess the question is, who wins?" "Everyone," Lyralii replied. "The Defense Council gets 12 members instead of one winner, each bringing different strengths to a collaborative approach that's already proven effective against our most dangerous enemy. And the Void Syndicate gets the unpleasant surprise of facing opponents who've learned to think in ways their intelligence couldn't predict," Chen added. "Plus," Webb observed cheerfully, "we've established a precedent for completely ignoring traditional competition formats whenever they stop serving their intended purpose." Princess Lyralii felt something shift inside her, a recognition that the future she'd always watched from the sidelines was actually a future she could help create. Her hover chair wasn't a symbol of limitation, it was command center from which she could coordinate solutions that no one else could envision. "Quirk," she said, "send a message to my father. Tell him the trials are concluded, the Defense Council has been selected, and his daughter would like to discuss her new role as Strategic Coordination Director. Your father may have questions about that title, considering it doesn't exist." "It does now," Lyralii replied, watching as the human team began helping other delegations pack equipment that would be shared rather than returned to individual homeworlds. "After all, if we're going to rewrite the rules of galactic defense, we might as well rewrite the rules of galactic leadership too." Jake approached her chair, still grinning. "Princess, it's been an honor working with you. Though I have to ask, any regrets about abandoning centuries of tradition?" "Only that it took us this long to realize tradition was holding us back," she replied. "Besides, someone once told me that problems improve significantly when nobody explodes. I figured that applied to more than just malfunctioning crystals." "Wise words," Jake agreed. "Though knowing our luck, the Void Syndicate probably has contingency plans for dealing with successful cooperation. Then we'll just have to stay one step ahead of their contingency plans," Lyralii said, her neural crown flickering with anticipation rather than compensation. "After all, we've got the one thing they can't predict or counter. Which is a princess who's tired of staying on the sidelines and a species that treats the impossible like a particularly interesting engineering challenge."